Hi, it's Tom here from Running Physio. Today I wanted to come and talk to you about an interesting new study which has challenged actually some of the preconceptions that we might have about our abilities to assess a runner and how economical they might be while they're running. Also, as ever, we've got the link to our running resource page with a great collection of free webinars there if you'd like to find out more about management of running injury. So let's talk about this new study then. It's been talked about a fair amount on social media. So it's Cochrane et al.'s 2020 paper on the visual classification of running economy by running coaches. So what they did is they took a selection of runners, and from those they picked 5 male recreational runners that had different levels of running economy, so that there was hopefully enough of a difference between these runners for the coaches to be able to pick out the most efficient. And then they had a group of 121 coaches of varying different levels, from high school coaches all the way up to international level coaches. And they asked them to view videos of these runners running on the treadmill. They viewed them from behind, from the front and inside, from the side rather, and tried to rank them from 1 to 5, with 1 being the most economical and 5 being the least economical. Now, what the results actually found probably will surprise many of us, in that none of these coaches got them all right. In fact, the majority, 82%, got either 0 or just 1 correct from their ranking. And whether they were accurate or not in their ranking didn't seem to correlate with any of their kind of coaching characteristics, like experience, for example. So even the high level, very experienced international level coaches were not able to rank these runners successfully from 1 to 5 in terms of their running economy based on purely watching them run. Now, this is interesting because I think a lot of coaches, perhaps a lot of us clinicians and therapists, would think that we would be able to look at a group of runners and estimate how economical they are. But actually they weren't really successful in doing this. And I think perhaps the answer lies in a number of different things here, but one is some of the identifiers they use. Now they asked the coaches to tell them what things would make them think someone had a good running economy and was perhaps therefore a quite efficient runner. And there were a few things that came out here. So they thought a higher stride rate and shorter stride length would be more economical, that a midfoot or forefoot strike pattern would be more economical, and footfall under the center of gravity would be more economical. They also said greater forward trunk lean would be more economical as well. So these are the things they're looking out for. But when you look at these things, it's debatable how many of these are actually associated with better running economy and performance when they're studied. So yes, perhaps at the top, higher stride rate, shorter stride length can be a bit more economical. There is some evidence to support that, things like Folland et al.'s work, although there's probably an upper limit to it, because if you up the step rate too much, you end up with a very short stride length, which is going to be less efficient. But midfoot or forefoot strike has not been found consistently to be more economical than heel striking. Now, footfall under centre of gravity, again, this is something we might hope to see in a runner. We might think it's more economical, but there's not a great deal of evidence to support that. There is some to suggest that overstriding is uneconomical, so perhaps that would link in with that. And then greater forward trunk lean is a bit of a debatable one. Yes, there is some evidence to suggest that it might be less economical. But what's really interesting is greater forward trunk lean has been included in the bad running economy section as well. So I actually think I wouldn't see greater forward trunk lean as a sign of good running economy. I would say probably, if anything, there's a little bit of evidence to suggest it's less economical. So if we go onto the right-hand side of the table here, the things they thought would be identifiers of bad running economy. Greater vertical displacement or bounce, yeah, that can be potentially if someone's a very bouncy runner, although again, not necessarily always consistent in the studies. Heel striking, well actually, as we said, heel striking isn't going to be less economical than forefoot striking necessarily. high body mass, possibly. And they've got a few that talk about lateral or transverse movements across the arms, or rotation of the lower body, or rotation of the torso. Again, there isn't a great deal of evidence to show that these are less economical characteristics. Likewise with high arm carriage. So what I think maybe the issue here is they don't have necessarily the best identifiers for what is good economy and what may be bad running economy. And if that's what they're using to judge, then it's not surprising that they're not very able to identify these runners based on their running economy and rank them successfully. So that does then beg the question, well, are there better identifiers? And I certainly think it's debatable. I think there's a lot we need to learn about economy and performance, but there are some things that I think I would probably focus a bit more on. Now, they've mentioned overstriding. Yes, there is evidence to support the idea that overstriding is less economical. So yes, that could be something to look at. But something they seem to have missed here is hip adduction. Now, hip adduction during stance, in some of the research, it explains as much as 43% in the variance in total running economy. So that could be a factor that we need to include in our assessment of economy. Also, peak knee flexion and extension range during running is another factor that's associated with economy. So that could be something that we would include that they haven't really looked at. And propulsive factors. Now, this is something that's been studied by people like Izzy Moore's, great review papers on this. How we achieve propulsion does really seem to be related to running economy, and it's not really been identified by any of these coaches in this particular study. So for me, I think we're missing some of the bigger things, and if we were to include those within our assessment of running economy, perhaps we'd be better able to rank people. But I'm certainly not claiming that we would be able to do that successfully all the time. And I think actually the task these coaches have been asked to do is really quite a tough one. Especially when it may be that the differences in running economy for these runners actually may be quite small. So to successfully rank them from 1 to 5 is not going to be an easy task to do. And there are also other things that are going to affect economy that we're not going to be able to see visually. Things like braking forces, the kinetic factors in running, muscle activation levels, a whole load of different things that you just simply can't observe, which will influence running economy. So what I would take from this as a coach, as a therapist, as someone who works with runners, is I would be cautious about the conclusions that we can make based on watching someone run in terms of how economical you think that they are. I'd also be cautious about any recommendations that you make based on those observations to improve their economy and performance, because we don't know necessarily whether making those changes is likely to be successful in doing that. I'd also say that there are quite a few different assumptions that we make based on watching people run that aren't really supported. So for example, you can't watch someone run and tell them they've got weak glutes or inactive glutes just from watching them run. You can't test strength from watching running style. The two aren't brilliantly well correlated. So I would be cautious about making huge conclusions based on what you see when you assess someone running. What we have a little bit more information about is how someone's running style influences the load on the various different tissues that we might be treating. So I would probably focus more on looking at their running style, working out how it might be loading maybe potentially sensitive tissues, and then trying to work out how we could change that style to reduce the stress on those tissues. I'd be a lot more cautious about making assumptions around running economy or running performance for individuals, really, because we just need to know a lot more about that. Okay, so interesting study. I'd love to hear what you think. I look forward to hearing some of your comments and things in the replies. Do you think that maybe you can do a better job of assessing running economy? Well, there are other things you'd look at that perhaps weren't examined by the coaches in these studies. What do you think? Are there some limitations in this paper? We've only got 5 runners in it and they're all male. Of course, that's going to be an issue. But are there other things you've come across in there that would make you doubt the conclusion? I'd love to hear from you in this. Let us know what you think in the comments and replies. I'll look forward to reading those later. And if you want to find out a bit more about running injury, make sure you check out our running resource page that I've linked to. I've also put a link to the study in case you want to read that. Okay, thanks very much for listening. Bye for now.